Evening, everybody. I trust that you are well, and I also hope that you had an amazing day. All right, so for today's lesson, our grade one English lesson, we will be doing adjectives that compare. And before we start with adjectives that compare, you're going to log into the aplusstudents.ca. Once you log into aplusstudents.ca with your username as well as your password, then you're going to select the subject of language arts and then grade one. All right, so once you selected the subject of language arts, grade one, and then you're going to scroll down up until you get to adjectives that compare. Under the chapter of adjectives that compare, we're going to be focusing on the lesson that three different lessons, right, under adjectives that compare. One being compare pictures using comparative and superlative adjectives, identify comparative and superlative adjectives, and does the adjective compare to or more than two? So that is going to be our focus lessons for tonight under the chapter of adjectives that compare. All right, so we are now going to go into the first one that says compare pictures using comparative and superlative adjectives. Okay, so if we compare pictures using comparative and superlative adjectives, right? It says comparative adjectives, it compares two people, animals, places, or things. So comparative adjective, right? It compares two people, to animals, places, or things. So with comparing two people, places, animals, or things, these words they end in er. So when we compare two people, to places, to animals, or things, the word is going to end in er, right? And an example is if the word is, for example, tall, right? Instead of saying Andy is tall than his sister, instead of saying Andy is tall than his sister, we can then say Andy is taller than his sister, right? So taller than his sister. So taller, it compares Andy to his sister, or basically the height of Andy compared to his sister. Then we have superlative adjectives, right? And superlative adjectives, it compares more than two people, animals, places, or things. And the superlative adjectives, they end in est. So with comparative adjectives, remember it ends in er, like the word. And with superlative adjective, it ends in est. because now you are actually comparing, let's say, one specific person to either more than two people, or it is being compared to a whole class, or they can maybe say um, this school is the biggest in the whole town, which means that it's being compared to all the other schools within the town or community. So that is superlative and comparative adjective. All right. Sorry. So now, with also um, adjectives that compare, remember adjectives are basically words that either tell us about the noun, or it is basically words that describes the noun, right? And with comparative and superlative adjectives, adjectives they compare, generally they compare people, animals, places, or things, right? It's just that we have basically people, animals, places, or things that is being compared by either only two people or more than two people. And we need to also basically know which words or what is the best vocabulary to use when we compare people or animals or places or things. See. All right. If we look if we look at these two, oopsie, let me go over down. If we look at these two cards that you see in front of me, right? We have a purple car and then we have the red car, right? So they are asking which one is older, right? So you need to basically try and see which one is older or the older model, right? Is it the purple one or the red one, right? And if you were to choose a car that is, for example, either the one that is older or one that is a bit newer, right? Then we will definitely say that the purple one is older. And why will we say that the purple one is older? We will say that the purple one is older because, firstly, based on how it looks, even the scratches, like the bumper is falling off, right? So that basically gives us the idea that it is a bit older. Even the doors, are not even properly closed. And then we have the red car. And as much as the red car looks like an older model car, but the car looks brand new. It looks clean. Everything is in place, right? It literally looks brand new, right? Which means that if we were to choose the car that is oldest, then we would say it is the purple car. So they basically ask which one is older, right? So older, which is OLDER, right? So older, and it ends in ER, which means that these two are only being compared to one another, right? So we can then say the purple car is older than the red car. Or we can say the red car is newer than the purple car, right? So remember we said these are comparative adjectives, and comparative adjective, it compares to people, to places, to animals, or to things, and it ends in er. All right. So which one is warmer? Which one is warmer? If we now look at both of these beanies, right? If we look at both beanies, the one on top, this one that we see over here, this one is the purple one at the bottom, right? We need to basically say which beanie is warmer. And if you look at the design of the beanie, right? Even like let's say the top one, it has got more fur in. It even has more coverings by the ears, right? Which gives us indication that the top one is more warmer than the bottom beanie, because the bottom beanie it looks like it's just like a piece of fabric, or let's say a thicker cloth that is put together, or let's say stitched together in order to make a beanie, right, or a cap. Whereas the top one has more fur in, more padded by the ears, right? Even the little poofies here by the bottom, it gives you more warm, it gives you a more warmer feeling, right? So basically these two beanies are now basically being compared. So we can say the top beanie is warmer, which is ER, than the bottom beanie, right? So the bottom one is less warm than the top one. This one is warmer than the bottom one, right? So which means that this is a comparative adjective, right? It compares to people, to places, to animals, or to things. In this case, two things are being compared, which is the two caps. All right, we now need to say which one is higher, right? Higher. If we look at the two hot air balloons that we see, right? Sometimes if you can, like if we look at, let's say, the how high it is in the sky, if that is the word, compared to the bottom one, right? The bottom one, you can basically still see that it is not as high because we still see that the basket of the balloon is still close to the trees, whereas the top one, it is basically higher than the clouds, right? So if we were to compare these two and say which one is higher, then we can say that the top hot air balloon picture is higher, right? So this one is higher, right? So higher. And in this case, we are comparing two pictures, right? Or two hot air balloons, right? So when we compare two people, or let's say in this case, two things, and then it's a comparative adjective. And with comparative adjectives, it ends in ER, right? So this one is higher, and then we can say this one is lower and ends in ER. So with comparative adjectives, when we compare two things, and then the word ends in ER. So the word ends in ER, like this. So higher, but this one is lower because this one is not higher than the top one. This one is lower than the top one. The top one is higher than the bottom one. All right, let's go next. Which one is smaller? We need to say which one is smaller. Here we have two birds, right? We have like a cute purple, blue, and green bird. And then we have a gray bird, right? So they want to know which one is smaller. So if we look at the size of both of these birds, then we can say this one over here is smaller, right? And the bottom one is bigger. So we can say this top bird is smaller than the bottom bird, and we can say the bottom bird is bigger. So instead of just saying it's big, we can say it is bigger than the top bird, right? And this is also a comparative adjective that compares two animals, right? And we said with comparative adjectives, it ends in er. All right, so now that is basically comparative adjectives, right? So far they've only given us examples of comparative adjectives. And once again, we have adjectives that compare people, animals, places, or things, right? And then with adjectives comparing people, animals, places, or things, we have comparative adjectives and we have superlative adjectives, right? Comparative adjectives, they compare two people, animals, places, or things, right? And they usually end in er. And then we have a superlative adjective, right? They compare more than two people, animals, places, or things, and they end in est. So in this case, like the picture we see on top, these two siblings are being compared. So Andy is taller in height than his sister. And the bottom one, Andy is now being compared to his friends, right? Or people in class. So they are basically saying he is the tallest in the class, which means that there's, of course, more than two people in class. All right, let's go to our test. All right, so now we need to say which one is smaller. They want to know which one is smaller. Is it the top one, which is the purple bucket or the purple car, or the big orange truck? So which one is smaller? So we can then choose the top one as being smaller, especially compared to this big truck with all with the different wheels, with all of the different wheels. Sorry. So we're going to say the top purple car is bigger, smaller than the big orange truck. Which one is fatter? We need to say which chicken is more fatter than the other one. All right, so if we look at which one is fatter, we can say the top one, which is option one, is more fatter. Oh, which one is louder? Right, they're comparing a kitty cat to a lion, right? So which one do you think is more louder? Is it the kitty cat or is it the lion? Especially when they roar or when the cat meows or purrs. So we will basically say that the lion is more louder, right, than the kitty cat. Which one is smaller? The purple, blue, and green bird or the gray bird? So we can then say the top bird, which is the purple, blue, and green bird, is smaller than the big gray bird. And which one is faster compared to, is that now a little sheep and a tortoise, right? So we can then say that as much as both of them are slow, but the sheep is faster. than the tortoise. All right, so now that is basically to comparing pictures using either comparative and superlative adjectives. And remember, we said comparative adjectives, it compares to people, places, animals, or things, and it ends in er. And superlative adjectives, it compares more than two people, places, animals, or things, and it ends in est. So now we are going to identify either a comparative adjective or a superlative adjective. And remember, comparative adjectives, right? They compare two people, animals, places, or things, and they end in er. And superlative adjectives, they compare more than two people, animals, places, or things, and they end in est. Okay, so yeah, they're asking, find the adjective that compares. Find the adjective that compares. Pet is the sweetest boy I know. We need to say, we need to identify the adjective that compares. So if we were to identify the adjective that compares, then we will say sweetest is the adjective that compares. Sweetest. Sorry. So we're going to choose sweetest, right? So this is the adjective. And if we were to identify which one it is, which adjective it is, we will say it is a superlative adjective because superlative adjectives, we said it ends in est. So Pat is the sweetest boy I know. So sweetest is our adjective that compare, and this is a superlative adjective. And a superlative adjective, it ends in est. Pete's story was sadder than Janet's story. So Pete's story was sadder than Janet's story. So if we find or we identify the adjective that compares within that sentence, and then we will identify sadder as the adjective that compare, right? So sadder, and sadder also ends in er. So sadder ends in er, and also Pete's story is compared to Janet's story, right? Which is two people story that is being compared, and then we can say this is a comparative adjective because remember we said comparative adjectives, it compares to people, animals, places, things, and it ends in er. So we can then say this is a comparative adjective that compares to people, which is Pete's story, to Janet's story, right? So sad is our adjective that we have identified and it ends in er. Canada is colder than Mexico. So Canada is colder than Mexico. So colder is our adjective that compare. Colder ends in er, which means that this is a comparative adjective. Colder, right? So Canada, or let's say Canada's weather is being compared to Mexico's weather, right? So they're saying that Canada is more colder than Mexico. So which means that these two places are being compared, right? So two places being compared, we call that a comparative adjective. and it ends in er, so it's a comparative adjective. All right, let's go next. We're going to do two more examples. Luke's boat is newer than Andy's. So Luke's boat is newer than Andy's. So if we identify the adjective that compares within the sentence, we can say newer, right? So newer is the adjective that compares within that sentence. And it is comparing Luke's boat to Andy's boat, right? Which means that Luke's boat is more newer than Andy's boat. That is what they are saying, right? So this is a comparative adjective. So this is comparative. This is comparative, right? Two people are being compared, or their boats are being compared, and we call that a comparative adjective. This is the highest hill in Oakland. So this is the highest hill in Oakland. So highest, if we identify the adjective that compare, we can say highest is the adjective that compare. So highest is our adjective that compare, right? And they're comparing this hill to all the other hills in Oakland, right? So they're saying that this hill is the highest hill in Oakland. So if we assume that there's more hills in Oakland, then basically this one is then say they are basically identifying this one as the highest one compared to all the other hills that we have or that they have in Oakland. So this is a superlative adjective, right? And a superlative adjective, so this is superlative. And a superlative adjective, right? It compares more than two things, right? Or places, or animals, or people. And it ends in est, right? So in this case, highest, right? So highest ends in est, so it is definitely also superlative. All right. Your shoes are wetter than mine. Your shoes are wetter than mine, right? So if we identify the adjective that compare with in that sentence, and then we will choose wetter. So wetter, right? So wetter is an indication that it is also a comparative adjective, right? Because it ends in er, and it compares basically these two people's shoes, right? Because it says your shoes are wetter than mine, right? So the shoes of, let's say, these two people are being compared, and we call that a comparative adjective. When we compare either two people, animals, places, or things, we call that comparative adjectives, and it ends in er. All right. Now we're going to do a test, right? Based on comparative and superlative adjectives. We need to find the adjective that compares, right? Snowy is the whitest goat of all. So snowy is the whitest goat of all. We need to select the adjective that compares. So is it whitest, which is the first option, or is it goat? So we need to choose between whitest or goat. All right, so if we select the adjective that compares, then we can say it is whitest, right? Which means that Snowy is the whitest goat of all the other goats, right? He's compared to more than two other goats, and we call that a superlative adjective that ends in est. So whitest, right? Not a goat. So the not the goat is the adjective, but whitest is the adjective that compare. Gabby's homework was harder than Beth's homework. So is it homework or harder? Homework or harder? So basically, Gabby's homework is being compared to how hard Beth's homework is, right? So we are comparing two people, to places, to animals, or to things within this um, question, right? So which means that we need to choose between homework or hard. So not homework, but harder, and it ends in er. This is the highest hill in Oakland. This is the highest hill in Oakland. We need to choose the adjective that compares. Is it highest or is it Oakland? We need to choose the correct one, the correct adjective that compares. Either highest or Oakland. All right, so if we choose the adjective that compare, then we will say highest. And this hill is being compared to all the other hills in Oakland, right? So they're saying that this specific hill, it is the highest in Oakland. So highest ends in est also. So this is a superlative adjective. Blue Point is nicer than Lakewood. So Blue Point is nicer than Lakewood, right? We need to find the adjective that compares. So Blue Point is compared to Lakewood, right? And if we choose our adjective that compare, and then we will say nicer. Nicer is our adjective that compares, that ends in er. Er. That's a comparative adjective. And an ant is lighter than a bee. So an ant is lighter than a bee. Is it lighter, the adjective that compares, or ant? Lighter or ant? All right, so if we choose the adjective that compare, right? So the ant is being compared to the bird, right? Which means that we are going to choose lighter, because an ant is lighter than a bee, right? And we call this a comparative adjective because these two animals are being compared to one another. And we said with comparative adjectives, the word ends in er. So we will go with lighter. All right. So that is basically identifying the comparative as well as the superlative adjective. So now we are going to our next lesson, which is, does the adjective compare to or more than to? So you need to look at the adjective in bold. In this case, Dusty is the fastest pony of them all. So Dusty is the fastest pony of them all. We need to look at the adjective in bold, which is fastest. It says, does it compare two ponies or more than two ponies. So fastest, right? So if we compare these two, or let's say these ones, then we can say that this, which is fastest, right, it compares more than two ponies. So we are comparing more than two ponies. So if we compare more than two ponies, then this is a superlative. This is a superlative adjective. Because a superlative adjective, it compares more than two animals. And in this case, Dusty is the fastest pony of them all, right? So even if there's 10 ponies, right, then it means that Dusty is compared to all of those ponies, right? Because I say of them all, right, which means all of them. It is more than two ponies. Buster is the softest rabbit of them all. Softest. We need to look at the word softest, right? So softest, it says, does it compare two rabbits or more than two rabbits? So in this case, more than two rabbits are being compared. Right, so more than two rabbits are being compared, and when we compare more than two animals, then we call this a superlative. So it's called a superlative adjective, right? And superlative adjectives, they compare more than two people, animals, places, or things in the ending est. Max's yard is flatter than Gabby's yard. Max's yard is flatter than Gabby's yard, right? They want to know, does it compare 2 yards or more than 2 yards? In this case, 2 yards are compared, right? So 2 yards are compared because they're comparing Max's yard to Gabby's yard, right? So we call this a comparative. So this is a comparative adjective, right? 2 yards that is being compared. So which means that flatter is our adjective that compares flatter. And this is a comparative adjective. It compares basically Max's yard to Gabby's yard and also ends in ER. All right, so now we're going to the test. Let's begin the test. It says you need to look at the adjective in bold. Does it compare two pools or more than two pools? So we need to say if it compares two pools or more than two pools. So our pool is warmer than Dana's pool. Our pool is warmer than Dana's pool. Right? So in this case, our pool, right, which is whoever that is talking, they are saying that their pool is warmer than Dana's pool. So basically, it is being compared to two pools. The two pools are being compared, right? So we all say two pools is being compared. The kitten is softer than the cat. So the kitten is softer than the cat, meaning that the baby kitten is softer than, for example, either the mommy or daddy cat. So softer. Does it compare to animals or more than two animals? So in this case, two animals are being compared. So two animals is being compared. And in Luke's house is colder than my house. So Luke's house is colder than my house. Are two houses compared or more than two houses are compared? So in this case, two houses are compared because it's Luke's house as well as my house is being compared. Because they basically just saying Luke's house is colder than my house. So basically, we're just talking about, let's say, my house and Luke's house. So two houses are being compared. Sorry, the blue train is faster than the red train. So the blue train is faster than the red train, right? So which means that in this case, the blue train is being compared to the red train, right? So we will say that two trains are being compared. So two trains. The old rope is shorter than the new rope, right? So now they want to know, does it compare two ropes or does it compare more than two ropes? Which is the old rope is shorter than the new rope. So we will say two ropes are being compared, which is the old rope and the new rope. All right. And now Dusty is the fastest pony of them all. So Dusty is the fastest pony of them all, right? Are we only comparing two ponies? Or are they comparing more than two ponies, right? So yeah, they're saying Dusty is the fastest pony of them all. So the words them all, it means that if, for example, there was a lot of ponies, then it means that Dusty is being compared to literally all of those ponies, right? So it's not just two ponies, but it is more than two ponies that Dusty is basically compared to. All right, then we also have Ruby is the oldest cow of all. So the oldest cow of all, right? So if you have 10 cows, for example, right? Because they're saying of all. So this farmer has 10 cows, and then it means that Ruby is being compared to all of the 10 cows, for example. So which means that this is more than two cows that Ruby is compared to, right? All right. So these are adjectives that compare, right? And we went over what a comparative adjective is as well as a superlative adjective is. And we said a comparative adjective, right? It compares to people, places, animals, or things, right? And it ends in er. And then we have a superlative adjective, right? That it compares more than two people, animals, places, or things, and it ends in est, right? So that is basically the end of our lesson on adjectives that compare. Thank you very much, grade ones, for listening. And I really hope that the lesson is quite informative, right, when it comes to comparing adjectives, right? And also the difference between either comparing two people, places, animals, or things, or comparing it to more than that, right? So we need to identify if it is either comparative or superlative. So you should have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.